Hello, good evening, everyone. I'm Sparsh and I'm host for today's event. I would like to start the event with a beautiful thought that the first time you say something, it's heard. The second time, it's been recognized. And the third time, it's been learned. And we've been learning since last 8 days from our prestigious mentors, the SK Azruddin sir, who's not only a mentor, he's also a full stack developer, podcaster, and a freelancer. A warm welcome from the whole team, sir. Before moving forward with today's session, I would like to give a quick glance for the previous session that was about React states. We learned about JSX, a syntax extension to JavaScript. We learned about state and hooks, which state of component is updatable and is used to contain data or information about the component. We learned about use state, use effect, and use content. Use state is used to manage state in the single component. Use effect is used to perform side effects in the function component, and use content is a parent of use state. There's a small announcement for all the participants that you can earn amazing gifts that you can grab being part of this 15 days month tech bootcamp. That are you can grab a T-shirt of Geeks for Geeks and a course coupon or voucher worth rupees 500 rupees. Terms and conditions are you have to mark the feedback and give genuine feedbacks. Second is you have to be actively participating in the quiz sessions going on Instagram handles. You have to be actively participate in the sessions. Only consistent participants will be receiving these goodies, and you have to follow our social media handles. I would like to request the backend team to paste in the links in the chat box for every one of us. And you can start maintaining your consistency from today onwards. So moving forward with the ninth day of Month Stack Bootcamp with Mr. S.K. sir, let's see what we are going to learn today from. Over to you, sir.
Thank you so much, Sparsh. Okay, so it seems like people are still joining. Let's move forward and first debug what we had yesterday. Let me share the screen. Okay, let us run. Okay, so meanwhile, our project is going to take a few minutes to get started. Till then, if anyone has any doubt, you can comment down. I know we are directly starting today, like not any other conversation or something. It's fine. Okay, good evening. Okay, so till now, anyone has any doubts regarding React or Node, so you can just comment it down and we can take it forward till our process is starting. Okay. Okay, so till it's getting started, let's move forward and see what we are going to learn in theory. So we learned till use context. Of course, we haven't used it. And again, so today we are not going to, okay, I missed a few parts of now. I'll cover those and let you know if I get stuck somewhere. Yes, for sure, Anvisa. Okay. So yesterday, till last day, we learned this use context and then not the additional hook anyway, but this use context we are not working. So here's something that I want to discuss with you all, which is, how we are proceeding in this boot camp is like I'm explaining all the terminologies, all the methods and everything, and demonstrating all of them, and then we are writing the actual code. And that is the reason we have extended and we are a bit backward till what we had scheduled to be completed with this bootcamp. And I think we might extend this, but I want to ask you, like, if any one of you have any problem to exceed, like it should be 15 days, or if it exceeds, then if you like, please comment down if you have any problem. If you do not have any issues, it's absolutely fine, but if you have any issues, just write it down, have issues, that's it. You are not going to be asked like what are the issues or something. We will try our best to complete it within 15 days boot camp, and if it get exceeds, then of course we are going to handle it. But I want to ask you, if you have any problem, then please comment it down that you have issues. That's all you need to do. Have issues, okay. Let's see how many has. So the reason why we are moving forward with this is like, see now, if we are going to complete this project, and we if we are going to complete this entire project, like the Zomato clone and everything from UI to backend, and with every single functionalities, is like, then I'll be moving forward and demonstrating. I'm not going to demonstrate each and every methods, like even only if it is necessary, and if it is not like, and rather than, what we are going to do is we are going to write the our actual code, and then while writing the actual code, I'm going to explain that this are this stuff what we are actually doing. So it might be like, what I'm doing is like, I'm explaining that this is one, and this is one, this is two, this is three. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to write the number like maybe 3 2 4 5 7, and then I'm going to explain that this is three, this is four, this is five. So it's going to be a bit jargon to understand, but again, that is the another process if you're going to end it within 15 days bootcamp. But if you have any problem, then you can just write it down, if like, if you don't want to exceed these. And if you're going to exceed this bootcamp, that I'm going to explain every single thing, and like not every single thing, but most of this stuff, and I can just freely elaborate and share that knowledge with you, that this is what it is actually doing behind the scene. So it depends if you want to learn, or if you want to learn in a deeper way, or you want to learn with the practical way. Like suppose this are the stuff what we are doing, and you are able to grasp it. So again, if you have any like, we might extend this boot camp, and if you have any issues, then just comment it down that you have issues. That's all you need to do, and then we can take it forward. So only one person have issues, and it seems like not much have. uh you want to learn deeply, yes, even me too. You know what happens, like suppose when we thought of this, then it's like we decided to go with this. Okay, if what we decided is like, we decided to go with this, plus one, plus one. Okay, okay, want to learn on this. Okay, cool. So what we decided is like, okay, comments are constant, so plus one. So seems like people are commenting, wanna learn deeply, wanna learn deeply, wanna learn deeply. Okay, okay, okay. Okay, so let's see how many of you are interacting literally, like not only just joining the class and just sitting around that, okay, fine, I have joined the class, now I'm attending the class, and then it should be down there. There is plus one, but it seems like there are 67%, and maybe 60 plus at least are most of you. Then just comment it down, and let's see. Like now, comment down if you want to go more deeply. You can comment anything, and if you have any issues, you can just write it down. Have issues. I'm asking everyone to comment it down. I'm asking everyone to put something in the chat box. And there are again 60 plus students, but it seems like only maybe 15 has already commented. Where are the other 45 plus? Come on, come on, come on, get the fire up. Comment it down. I can count your names on. Shakev, Lakshmi Narayan, fine. Sai, fine. Okay. Let's go. Shashwat, let's go. Divya, no issue. Cool. Okay. Come on, come on, come on. I'm still waiting, Ashwarya, no issues. I'm still waiting everyone to interact with this. Like suppose we are going to extend it, and we are not even sure that we are going to extend for 1 days or maybe one more week. But what I can assure you is like, at the end of the day, you will get a lot of knowledge and with a deeper perspective. Like if you move forward and then learn deeper, like again, as I told, that this is the boot short of a boot camp. So here we are not trying to learn every single thing, but what we are trying to do is getting the practical knowledge. Industry ready developer, yes. Neeraj, Nikun. Yes. So what we are doing here is trying to build the entire practical knowledge and understand what we had decided. Like in this bootcamp, what we had decided before is like we are going to we are going to create a sort of a project and demonstrate all the functionalities from Node and React. But here it seems like what we have learned, like when I'm going with the flow, then I'm trying to explain all of these things. And because again you are a beginner, I'm expecting you as a newbie on Node and React. That's why I'm trying to explain all of these things, because if I'm going to write such codes, then like as we had decided, like we are going to build a practical project. So I'm not going to create any to-do list where only simple functionalities will be there. I'm going to create the entire, not entire, but the e-commerce module here. So this e-commerce module does not require the same methods that we already do short of a crud into do, right? So here it requires the complexities, and how we can move to the complexities if we are newbie. So as a newbie, we cannot I cannot expect you to be more proficient and understand this new stuff with those complexities. So that's why I'm trying to explain this and make it more friendlier for you, and then we are moving forward for to the complexity stuff so that you can grasp it easily. I want to deep learn, but I am having final exams next month for semesters. Yes, yes, most of you has this, that the issue. Yes, I totally understand this. Okay, no sure, so no sure. So it seems like only two people are there who have problem. Okay, so what we can do is like, even so we might extend this. Let me talk to Ashutosh first, and we might extend this. And then even if you are extending, then for your exam and for the people who don't want to extend, so for them we are not going to extend this much, but maybe for a few days at least. And because I want freedom to teach you in a better way, I don't want to go forward like, like, okay, fine, let's just build it, let's just show it, and it's fine, now we are done with it. At the end of the day, if you are not getting that knowledge, then it is not beneficial for both of us. So what I want to do here is for the sake of your knowledge only, and we are not going to sell anything, and this is not even paid or something. What we are doing here is just for the sake of growing community and for the sake of getting such knowledge from here. Okay, perfect. So let's move forward and dive into the document sections. Okay, so it seems like project, oh, it failed. I don't know why. We are going to fix that, but let's understand this first. So use context we had faced, and again, we are going to build this state management system. But again, for that, we need to move forward and learn use reducer also. So let me go through these first, and then we are moving forward with the actual. Okay, so use reducer, and then I'll move forward and create the state management for our app, and then we'll move forward and create the actual UI and something. And again, for UI, we are going to use something else. We can call it like material UI. This is basically a React front-end based library, which we can use to build these kind of components. So these are very easy actually. Like with CSS, we have to, I'm maybe most of you already are aware of bootstrapping. So bootstrap is one thing, and then on the other side, these kind of advanced UI components are also there. So we are going to use material UI today, which is React UI library. So the React UI library, and what we can get is like such kind of a components. And again, we are going to dive more deeply into this. Like, you don't need to write much CSS here. What you need to write is just define their components with as you know already what is component. Like suppose this card is a component, and maybe this box is a component, because this is a custom tag, right? So custom tag means they have defined it somewhere, and we are using this as component. So there are predefined components here. So that's why I told React is so powerful, because we can define the component and we can use it anywhere. So they have created a lot of components like this, maybe like button, this kind of navigations, toggles, and so on. And then we are going to use all of these, like most of these, in our project just by using their component base, and we just need to define some certain properties or something. That's all. So again, we'll go for this documentations also, but let's move forward and learn use reducer first. So now we know, just for a short refresher. Use context is basically use state is we are going to hold certain state, and we can manipulate those state. Like suppose we can get that state and we can again put that state, like we can update that state with this. Where's that? With their second parameter. Oh, we have moved it. We can move forward. Like use state. Yes. So with these kind of a parameter, so these are the syntax. So you can get your mind refreshed with this. And then use effect is again we are going to use this use effect. Now we have a short of a callback. This is for predefined function anyway. So there's a callback we define. And at the end of the callback, what do we define? If you remember, dependencies, right? Now we can move forward and use context. And again, use context is going to hold use context we are going to use for the global state management for the entire app again. And this is use reducer. So what use reducer does is, maybe if some of you have already worked with redux or something, then it would be very easier for you to understand, but again for others it is not that much. But even if you understand this use reducer, you are going to understand the basic functionalities like redux. And the kind of a state management system we are going to create, uh, like that. Yeah, we can say that this kind of a state management system that we are going to create is short of a redux fundamentals we are going to use. Like suppose this is state, actions, and so on. So let's see how this gets used. Like maybe if you can read out more into documentaries, an alternative use state which accepts a reducer for type. Like in your user state, what do we expect? Simply a state and a set state, right? But here is use reducer has a bit more complexities here, and how we can define it. Suppose the count that we held, you remember in while like yesterday, last day when we were discussing on use state, we were playing with the numbers and all. So now this has defined a bit more, because suppose in user state you can only use one action, right? Like if here we are calling it dispatch, but there we used to call it set state. So that set state is going to work only one way. Like set state is going to here we define the initial value, and then set state is going to replace that, or maybe play with that initial value. But here it's not the case. Here we are providing certain switch case which is going to be the reducer. So the first parameter is the reducer, like me this particular switch case function, where in this reducer we are going to get, like for this user state, we are going to get these two actions. Firstly, sorry, we are going to get this action, right? And this yes, and this state. We are going to define how we are going to do this. So in this reducer function, this reducer will call this reducer function with state and action, right? And this action is coming basically from this dispatch. So it's a bit complex, but I'm still trying to make it more easier for you. So now again, from starting, use reducer is a React hook which we use to manage multiple states. And the way we use is, we define a reducer switch case function, and we define the initial state, which is this one. Like suppose the initial stage is count 0, right? Now, before understanding the reducer, let's understand how we are going to use it. So it will be more easier for you to understand how reducer works. So this use reducer returns two things. Firstly, the state, like not the initial state, but the current state. Like this initial state only, this initial state only, but the current state of the initial state. Like suppose when you with use a state, we were updating that, and then it was becoming like 1 2 3, and that was not holding there, right? But it was holding there until the page reloads. But here this is going to stay there. And for the for the global state management, and then the current status we are going to get with state, and again the same as user state. So it is going to return that state, and this dispatch. So this dispatch is a function, like as a method where we send two things. Firstly, the type, and we actually send an object, and in that object, this object is basically the action object. Again, we use dispatch. Again, this is a pretty self-explanatory, which is like we use dispatch to dispatch something. And what do we send? We send a sort of a object with type and action. Action we are sorry, type and payload. We are not using payload here, but it's fine. We can go move forward and of course can understand this. But what it does is, and we can also send multiple one, but here we need in this case we need only one thing, which is type. And this action object is basically this action object which in which this use reducer receives from dispatch and send to the reducer. So again, we are sending this object with dispatch, like we are dispatching this object, and with this dispatch, use reducer is calling this function with this particular action and state. So this reducer has two parameters, state and the action we are sending, we are dispatching, right? So in this action, what we are actually getting, this particular object, right? So depend on this type. Now we have this switch case. Of course, you must know this. This belongs to core JavaScript only. So in this switch case, what it happens, it depends on these. Like suppose this is the type, and depend on these, based on these and different cases return different scenarios. Like you can work manually. Now with this action we are holding this, like the type would be different, like the type would be the could be multiple case. Here the type is decrement and increment. So here if the case is now that this type, if this type case is increment, then simply return the count, and whatever the current state is, that state is for this particular state, which is an object. So state dot count plus one. So now if this is increment, then again the same way as we were doing while use state, but this is doing it right away with simply by sending what type of action it is. So we can define multiple type of actions. We can dispatch multiple type of actions here, right? So this is the help of, this is the power of use reducer. And again, we are going to use all of this. Excuse me. So let's just implement in our code now. Now. Okay. Okay. So in our code, what we were doing last day is like, here we were defining this context, right? So instead of context, let's call it uh, state something. Okay. So we can call it global state, or maybe and this state, oh no, it should be capital, or we can call it state provider. Excuse me. Okay, we can call it state provider because this is going to provide the entire state system. Now let's just comment this down. So our page works at least. The context is not defined, it is absolutely fine. Perfect. Okay, now, so let's define these from the starting. No, let's just create context, which is going to hold this for in a global level, but this create index react context. Okay, now we are holding this for the global. We are holding the entire state for global state, right? Now what do we need? We need to create a state provider where we are going to handle the provider, and we are going to use reducer to send such. So port const state provider. So we are going to create functional component, and this functional component will receive something like reducer, and then initial yes, and then it is going to let's not return it. We, instead of curly braces, we can just return right away. So if we wrap this with curly braces, we need to define return, and if you're wrapping this with parenthesis, then we don't need to write return, we can just return it right away. So now instead of this count context, we can put something like user context, and we need this user context, this but with provider initial state, and the last thing would be children. Now here this children is going to be this. We are going to define all of these things. Hold on for a moment. And then in value, so in provider we define a value which is going to hold for the entire uh, global state, right? Now here is a trick. For this value, we are going to use reducer. So this we are going to use something like reducer, and the first parameter is reducer. The first parameter we are going to pass is reducer, and the second is initial state for sure, and the initial state. Okay, perfect. Now we have this reducer. Now, of course, there are a lot of questions. I can understand this. Um, okay, so firstly, what are we doing it here? Now, see, in this value, okay, let's just code this, then we are going to understand, because I know this is going to be a bit more complex for you, but we can write it down. We can, when we'll be seeing how it's working, then we can explain that this is working, and you know why this is working, because we are doing such stuff. So now for now, we can just explain it, right? We are defining a component, which is a state provider. And in this US state provider, we are defining the context provider, which is going to be this uh, user context, not like this, which is user context. And then here the default value, we are passing use reducer, and this is use reducer, you know what this returns, the state and the dispatcher. And this is state provider, we are having this three parameter, not parameter, an object with this three properties. Now see, we have defined this as an object, not parameter. So now this reducer, we are expecting reducer, we are sending this reducer to the use reducer, and then the initial state, which is we are sending through use reducer, as we just saw in the documentation. And this children, let's understand this children first, because we are going to work with children, and this is a sort of an advanced, not advanced, but maybe uh, less than advanced or more than beginner, so something mediocre level. So let's children this. Now instead of this, let's export our const, maybe uh, use, no, not, we can define something like use state, but okay, let's define as use state value. So in this entire application, we are just going to use this state value, and like this. This is state value. How? Just by sending this user context, as we already went through yesterday. So now let's utilize this in our application. So in application, let's forget all this. The state provider, what we are getting is two stuff. Firstly, state provider itself, and then the use state value. Okay, so state provider is a component. So let's just wrap this in the component. And here, yes, I wrote it correct, I guess. Not doing anything wrong. Get this at the beginning anyway. Okay, so this is state provider. Now let's see what state provider is expecting these parameters, but with children. Now, what is the children that we are defining here? Now, suppose whenever we create a component and we expect certain components as in children and use it right away, then this children is basically under this, like under this component, whatever we are defining, this is the children. So this use provider is exporting this data with an object while objectifying as in children. So this is the static name. Actually, you cannot change this to something else. That's why here we are not using parameter, we are using this object, because state provide here, because from here state provider is already providing the entire application as children. So we are using this just right away, and we are using this, and we are wrapping this children, like wrapping this entire application with provider, with user context provider. Yes, and the default value is this. Now let's move forward. Okay, so this state manage now our state like the state man provider, the management is now ready. Now we need to understand there are few more stuff which is coming together. Okay, so to understand those, let's understand what are state. Like suppose in the entire in this project, what is state and what kind of a state we need here, then we can move forward. Because I okay, this is my bad actually. I'm up from the third day. Last 3 days we are discussing on state management, but we are not sure what is actually state management and whom we are calling state, right? Okay, now let's focus on that. So state. Now in an application, like suppose this Zomato, right? Now we state we are calling a certain value which we are going to hold for some reason. Maybe of course we call it constant, but in if we are calling the if but in this web application we call it state, because that has more features. Like we have something like the global on front end, we have something like the global state. Suppose why we have defined this user context here, this user context here, because in the entire application we need this user context. Like suppose while logging to the home page, we can check like the user exists or not, then we can check with this user context. This context is basically that state only. So we can check this user context that the user exists or not. And on the other side, suppose when the user is maybe ordering something, and then again we need to fetch certain API, or the order API with which user is literally ordering, to which trying to order, and some datas and so on we are going to get with user data. So this user data needs to be in the entire application when the user is logged in, right? This is the first reason. This is one thing for this. And then secondly, I guess in this entire application we are going to use this user context only, because there is not much we need in this application. But sometimes, we defined multiple providers. Of course you can do that, you can define multiple providers to define multiple states. And you can also define like in this value, the default value, you can destructure, like you can send multiple values to manage multiple state. That is also possible, but here we are playing with reducer. So now let's define our reducer and create one. So let's create a new file which is going to be reducer.js. So here, the very first thing is going to be export first initial, no, initial state. So firstly, we need to decide what is going to be the initial state. So that's user, right? So there would be a user which is going to be null. At first, the user would be null. And secondly, we can call it something like card, because yes, we are also going to work with card. So yes, okay. So we are also going to work with cart, and that this cart is basically suppose we are going to work with multiple. Yes, this is the another state. We can call it a state. So because in the entire application where wherever we are navigating, if we are adding something to our cart, and that particular cart needs to hold in the entire application. Like suppose from if we are going to the user page, if you're going to any product page, or if you're going to any other product page, any other category, or anywhere we are trying to navigate in the entire application, this cart value not need to be changed, right? That needs to be there if you're adding something in the cart from anywhere. So this also needs to be in the global state. So for that, let's rename our context. So this user context become our maybe state context, we can call it. Yes, because we are managing state here, so it's fine. But user context, there's something wrong. React hook use context cannot be called at the top of the level. And where are we defining it? Okay, so here is an error. React hook use context cannot be called at the top level. React hook must be called in a React function component or a custom React hook function. Okay, so we need to create a custom React hook, but here we are deciding to do this in the, oh, we are throwing this as an just as a variable. So we should just convert this to like this, and it should work. So now we are exporting this with a callback function, which is going to be used anywhere. So this is basically our custom hook. We can call it hook. There's a custom hook. Now in reducer, we have defined our initial values. Now defined our reducer. Now where we are going to work, we are where we are going to work with all of the dispatchers and all. So as we have already seen, what we are going to get here, the state and the action, right? So, and we are going to define a switch case here like this, where this in the switch case, this is going to be the action dot type. Of course, this could be custom, but here what type of dispatch we are going to send, it's better naming convention, I guess. And then what kind of error is that? Expression comma. Oh, wow. This is a third one. Okay. And then the value, suppose we the value could be, okay, we also need to define the what kind of object it needs to be, right? So from the reducer, let's create another one, which we can call it something like action, or maybe action type, which is going to be an object. And we can define, like, now for today we are going to work with login and sign up and login and all this, right? So the first, suppose we want to set the user, right? So we can name it something like set user, which is going to be maybe 1. Yes, we can keep any number because we are not going to use it anywhere. What we need is just this type of type. We are going to use the same action to dispatch and then to set this here. So if this case is maybe action type dot set user, then what we are going
Excuse
to
me,
do,
sir.
yes, please.
Sorry to interrupt you, sir. There are some queries in the chat box.
Oh, yes, I'm missing those. One moment. Okay, so can you please explain this use state and context again? Anvesh, sure. State is like, okay, some Jagreet has already explained. So state is like the data for that session user. State is like the data for that session. or the user, like card, which user is logged in, and etc. Reducer is a function which takes the current state and an action and then modifies the state accordingly. Like if cart reducer gets set to cart action. Okay, so Jagrit is already there to help you out. I think he already has this. Okay, so Anvesha can explain use this use and state. I'm not getting. Explain this use and state or use state. Oh, use state and context, I guess. Okay. So use state is basically, again, we need to go back. Acha, okay. Let's just try to understand. Anvesha, give it a not only Anvesha, but everyone try to read out the documents sometime. You will get more deeper understanding again and again. So user state is basically holds some initial state and it returns with this state, it returns an array. This is a method, right? So this basically returns an array, and that array has two values. The first one is the state, like the current state. This is the initial one, like at the beginning you define it, and it returns the current state, and the set state updates that state. Like suppose you can use the set state, and with this this is a method basically, like this set state, and you can pass the new state, and this new state is going to set in this initial state, and it's going to keep update the every time you are going to use this set state. And then on the other side, this state, like suppose if you used set state and set this new state, consider this as string, you have used set state and passed this new state. Now the user state holds new state, and this, and then after that, if you return, if you expect, if you log or something, there's a state, then the state is the current value, and the current value is new state, right? So this is how use state works. And the use context in the same way, but a bit different. It literally holds the value and let you use everywhere else, like this my context. Firstly, you have to create the context as we just did, like this, create a context. So it create a context, and then it you can pass it right here, and then it returns the current, like the current state at we were doing there. This literally returns the current state, and this you and on the other side, what you need to, and the initial value where do we defined is right here. Like we wrap the entire application with that particular context dot provider. So provider is basically providing the value. What value? The initial value. The initial value it provides. I know it's a bit complex, like we are defining this use reducer in the initial value, but we are going to come up with this while we'll be actually coding on this. So okay, so user state is basically for globalizing that particular state, and user state is just for a single uh, for a single module, for a single page. I think that's pretty much it. And now let's move forward and use reducer. Now we have like set state, or we can also use action is like we can type login and then log out, which is going to be true. Now, if this helps, then save user. And the way we are going to save this user is, um, okay. So with this action, we are also going to get payload, right? So let's just save the user right away. So now we have initial state, and yes, I need to export it, right? Or we can destructure it. Yes, let's just destructure it and get the user and the cart. So here we can define user. Oh, no. So user state dot user is going to be action dot payload. Again, I know you have in the documentation we haven't seen what is payload, but this is just, we are just going to add the payload in the same action object we saw right there. And that payload is basically going to hold the user data and it's going to set it here. So now if the action is login, then simply save this payload and return, like return initial user, and just save this user and then return it simply. Uh, okay, but yes, we need to hold it and not like this. Let's just return this. Mm, Let's see what more. No, there's a wrong way of what I'm thinking of is if we can, if you're, we are setting this particular user, but we also need to return this, right? So the way we can return is, okay, state this. Let's return. Okay, so let's return an object where let's hold the entire state. Okay, so we are like with the reducer, we are going to return this state, right? Because we are getting certain state also. So we are getting the state and the user is going to be not the user, I guess the initial user. The user is going to be, and this state is basically the initial state, and initial state is this, right? The entire object. So this is the entire object, and what we are telling is keep the initial, keep the rest of this state, like where whatever the cart is, or maybe not. This is just a better practice. And then user, and just set the user to something like action dot payload. That's it. So we are going to define this, like we are just getting this state, whatever we are getting, like suppose while calling this while calling dispatch for this login, we are just going to get, we are also going to get the current state, and with that current state we are going to define this. uh, yes, so we are going to define this user with action.payload, whatever user we are getting with payload. And then break is not needed. Then suppose the user has logged in, right? Now what if the user is trying to log out? So let's copy this, and here we define something like log out, and then set, hold the current state and simply go back to the previous one, which is set user null. So now we are going to keep a checker. If the user is null, then there is no, the user is not logged in. And then if the user is and then if that user and then if someone is trying to log in, then with that action we are going to set that particular user. Now this initial state we are going to use for our provider here, initial state. As I told you, like we are going to define all these children. We now know what is children. Now this reducer and this initial state. So we are going to, because this initial state and the reducer we are passing to use reducer. Now let's just understand how we are just trying this props and what are those actually. So this initial state we are trying to pass, right? And then secondly, we are will be passing this particular reducer function, right? So let's do it. Let's go to the application and let's export from, okay, so import an object because we are going to destructure it. And okay, ES5 data. So and just go back to the state provider. Now from not state provider, from reducer. And from reducer, what we are getting is the initial state, and what we are going to get is um, reducer. Now here in the state provider, we are expecting two things. Firstly, initial state, which is going to be initial state, and secondly, reducer, which is going to be this reducer. Okay, now let's understand what are we doing it here. Now we have just created the initial state. Let's define this below so it makes no noise, and we are also going to export it anyway. So now we are defining initial state for cart and user, and we are also defining this users this reducer switch case, which we are ultimately sending to the use reducer we just saw. and we are defining certain actions. Like suppose maybe if the user is maybe if the user is trying, or maybe if we call dispatch, then what then we are getting the action type, the login, like with login dispatch, then this is what we are getting. And what we are doing is we are also getting the payload, and then we are setting that to the user, like to this initial state. And then the user is successfully logged in, because in the entire application there would be a certain check, which again we are going to implement, that if the initial state if in the initial state the user is null, then the user is not logged in. Perfect. So now let's go to our application and let's see. So this, right? Now this is the time to use okay. So till now, if you have any queries, we can move forward and take some. Understood. Card in initial state. This, yes, card in initial state should be array. Perfect. And no much. Perfect. Yes, so Jagreet is always there to help me out if we are doing something like it is 0, but here we are going to add items. So the initial value should be array. Of course, it should be, but when we are going to, we can change it even now. When we are going to add this, add the items, then like for now, we are not going to work on card. Today is just the user login, logout. So let's just do it. Now let's go to the app, and now it's time to work with some UIs, and then we can move forward. Uh, mm, mm, mm. Yes, we can use UI, but okay, let's just end this. Like, let's get a short of a demonstration, and then we can move forward and get more. So use state value, and this is state value we are getting from this. So for this state provider, we are simply returning, we are exporting this as state value, right? And here we are importing this. Now, what this state value is doing. So this is just simply just returning this context, right? And what this context of default value has. So this use context return, I know it's getting a bit more confliction, but just go through this. And if you read more documentations, you'll understand. With all these terminologies, we are just creating our own system, like our own state management. So later on the entire application could be managed. And again, this is how we use, like how I use in industry level, but again there are more optimized versions. But if later on if you go through these, then you can use it for your own applications, like me freelancing on somewhere. And if you see, like there are also there, you might also face certain scenarios where if you join somewhere maybe as an intern or maybe on your job, and you might see that they are not using a better state management system to do it. And then you can just literally go down and understand what you did here, and then you can suggest them that this is the optimized way we can use it. We can use, what are we doing it here, we are using three components, three user hook together to create our not three, actually two. So we are creating this two react hook together to use our to create our global state management. So the use context and use reducer. Now, so this use context returns the default value of context, right? Now this default value of context we define here. And what is the default value of the context? It's simply use reduce. We are using another function which is use reducer. Now whatever use reducer returns becomes the context initial value. Again, whatever this use reducer method returns, it becomes the default value of the context. Now what does it return, as we just saw? So it returns an array which has two item, and that two item is the initial state and the method with what we can just dispatch it. So let's just get it. So initial state and then dispatch. So this two thing it is returning right now. Here in the initial state, we are getting user and card. So we can just restructure it with something like user. So this becomes like this. Now we are getting the initial state and the dispatch function. Now let's use this dispatch function somewhere so we can demonstrate a bit. Uh, yes, okay. And this time we can use effect. So it will help us to understand what is actually happening. Like if we are going to manipulate this user data, right? So we also need to check that the user is literally working properly or not. So let's do it. This. So simply console.log, maybe user is simply the user. Now, use effect is going to log this user, but when we are going to, if we do not put anything, then if every time we are going to load the page, it's going to provide that. It's going to give us that. Let me just open the log. Object is not an object anyways. So it says object is not iterable. Okay. Initial value, and this also shows object is not iterable, and that is a bit strange because this is not going to understand, and that is the way we are going to use. Okay, we are going to come up with that, but okay, we are getting an error. Let's change this to initial state maybe, and this user is not defined. So this initial state.user. Okay, so this says use state value is returning the initial state, which is null, right? So here we can see. Okay, so type error object is not iterable because we are trying to iterate on the object. Again, someone has tried to iterate on my screen, which I really don't like. Okay, so now initial state, right? Now we are trying to iterate this, but there is no, it says it is not even returning this. So let's understand what are those. But okay, firstly, let's let's complete this use effect and then we can move forward. So here it says, or we can just go to, yes. So here we are supposed to get this user. We are going to fix this in a bit. Now this user, we are going to log this user, right? But if we are going to put in empty dependency, then every time we reload this page, then only we are going to see this log, and that's it. But what we need is every time this user changes, we need to see what or who are the user and what's what. So let's just put a dependency of that particular constant, which is user, and that is how simple it is. Perfect. Now let's move forward and see what we did wrong in our state management. So reducer, initial state, and children. Then we are going to return it. State provider, reducer, yes, looks good. Yes, and then use state value with state. Yeah, oh, what happened? Okay, maybe this is state value. Here we are going to send this a state context, but this state context is the provider. Okay, why it is not supposed to, or no, export this is state context, but we are supposed to get this context here. You see any typo? I guess someone has commented. Again, Jagrit is there to help me out. Provider initial context is create context that would be returned by use state value. Exactly. So in this use state value, we are creating this context. Yes, we are creating this context and we are sending this state context and returning it. State context. Yes, we are creating this context and returning it in the use state value. But this seems something to be wrong. Type object is not a travel symbol. If you do weird context one and console use state value, don't one. Okay, so for now here, let's just use this as an initial value, initial state, and use this to objectify conditionally if this is there or not. Oh, no. Oh yes, right, got it. So what I'm doing here, I'm using, no, this is also not supposed to be, this is also not supposed to be, because we have already defined it there as in constant. Yes. Okay, so initial state this, and even here we can do this. And for now, this should work anyway. Oh, still, okay. So this says initial state is there, and it says we cannot get dispatch or anything. Okay, let's use something like, let's log this out and understand what are we getting here actually. Data. Maybe we are holding we are expecting the array, but here we might be getting the object. Okay, clear log, and here the data is done defined, and there is short of prototype also. So this use state is returning nothing. That is interesting. So this use state is using the use context with state provider. Let's print something maybe as we told one, and the data is one, but this is not how we are going to use it. State value is going to be this. Yes, the state. Okay, someone else again commented. Okay, so it seems like now we have defined our state context here, and then we are using that state context, and we are returning to the use context. Yes, we are returning this with use context. Our life is so strange, no? Anytime we get something done, and error is never going to leave our hand. Bug is always going to be your colleague. Maybe not the best one, but bug is always going to be your colleague. Okay, so state context we are defining, and then we are returning it, but here we are supposed to get this and data. Oh. Okay, got it. Okay, so the thing is we are defining this state here, right? And we are sending this initial value and the reducer. Now see how we are, why are we getting this? Code can never be wrong. You are the always wrong person, or maybe you're, I mean, not the wrong person. I'm sorry, not the wrong person, but your code has something wrong. So we are providing this state in this, we are wrapping this particular component with this state provider, and then we are defining initial state and the reducer, right? So this state management system is underneath these particular children, like this particular application is covered, not the not this, like, because this component is outside the state management system, right? So this is not the ideal way of doing it. So let's just change this and go to our not this one. Go to our index.js where we have defined it already, where we are using this our application. Now let's wrap this entire application with this state management one. So let's copy this, go here and paste it here. And instead of this, just defined app and then import all this stuff which we need. I know this is about to throw the error, not this, from the reducer maybe. Yes, we are getting all of this stuff from the reducer. And let's put CSS down. Perfect. This looks good. State provider we need, which we're getting from the state provider. And this use value, we are not going to use it here. And this looks perfect. Yes. So now what we did, we wrapped this entire application in the index. So this state management works everywhere. Now this application is under that state management. Now if we just log this, or maybe we are logging, I have no idea. Console log webhooks. Let me just run this again. And now we have data with array of 2 items, and that array is like fun. First one is this data, the initial value, like the cart is array and the user, and the second one is prototype object, which is actually a method actually, which is a dispatch method. So here we can just control Z what we were actually doing, right? And then we can remove this is state, and we are not going to use this one and the state provider because we already defined it somewhere else. Okay, now let's refresh the page, and nothing worked. So it seems like if the user is defined, right? Okay, now let's create, oh, there is a button, and here now let's define a method, login for now. So what this login is going to do is simply using this dispatch method, and this dispatch, as we have already seen, this literally takes an object where we can define this type, which is going to be login, and from we are going to get is login action type dot login. This is going to be the type and the payload, right? So let's define the payload is one, which an object which is a user, and this name is maybe Robin. So here now this dispatch is now dispatching this user name or this particular user object, and there would be more user object, the entire user object as we were using while adding a user, and then the type is the action type. And then when we are using this dispatch for on this login, let's use this login event here on the on click function. So when we click on click, and this works. Okay, let's refresh the page. I don't know why the first time it's not working anyway. So that is how it's work, but there are many more stuff which might be needed. Okay, so here let's not return an object. Define this directly here. Yes, now let's refresh. Okay, so we were returning a callback, which is not needed. We can define this log directly to the use effect callback, and secondly, the dependency. So the moment we get reloads, we see is there any user? So the user is null. Now let's click here and see what happens. Now the user is there. And one more thing, so there's an object. And one more thing, if you notice, if you're tapping this, and it's so smooth, like if and how this working, like suppose this change, so immediately this is dispatching to the state provider, and with this reducer, and this reducer is going to take state and the action. The state is the current state, like the initial this particular state, and then an action. That action has type and the payload, and depending on that type we are going to return this state, and what we are going to return this state, and again we are also setting this. right? So this dispatch is basically setting this particular state for us. Now, what we want to set, just take whatever state is there and set the user to be action.payload. So action.payload, what are we sending? We are sending the user object here. So here in the payload, we are sending this user object. So now we have successfully integrated our entire state management system. So in any module, now we are going to create multiple module, but in any module, wherever we can just call this use state hook, which is our custom hook. Now we have also successfully, you know, integrated. We have created our own custom hook. So we can call this use state hook, and again, it comes our bind custom hook. Oh, really? Now let's see how we just created. So the use custom hook is basically using this another using another hook. We are using this use context only, but we are calling this custom hook because we don't want to call this. We don't. If we use this use context, then we also need to pass this context parameter, right? But we don't want that. We already have this parameter here, but so why not to use it here and then call from anywhere else? So that's why we are using this state management. We are using this custom hook. Now here, when we are expecting that we are using this hook, and then it's returning what reducer is supposed to return, because reducer is our initial value, and whatever any reducer returns, it gives us the initial one. It gives us the initial value, and initial value, the reducer returns an initial value and the dispatch method. So in initial value, we are destructuring, because in this case we only need the user. So we are logging the user with use effect, and use effect is so responsive for its dependency. Like every time the dependency changes, if you see here, every time the dependency changes, it literally logs it and see. So and then we have created a method where we are using on this on click button, and button on the on click method, and then we are using this dispatch and dispatching the action, and in that action we are dispatching the type should be action type login, and we are sending this payload as in user. So this is how simple it's going to be. And of course there are many more stuff we are going to come up, but it seems like for today the time is up. Now if you have any queries regarding this or anything, we can move forward, but today's session I started with this, so I'm going to end this for a short of intro, and then we can move forward. So if you have any queries, we can take it right away. Yes, we are coders. Yes, Utkarsh, we have to make friendship with with bugs, that's how our life is, but trust me, it's fun. And it's very what I feel is coding is very passionate. I don't know, like obviously there are people, there are also players who play football out of passion. There are also players who play football just for the sake of business. I don't know any football players are in there or not, but maybe we can consider as in business, or maybe an artist. Some people does it for the sake of money, some people does it just for the sake of living, considering as a job. But trust me, if you take this coding thing in your life as a passion, you are never going to be bored. You are always going to be hungry for more knowledge, for more stuff, and to create something different. Like as a coder, as a software engineer, we always create something new. We are constantly building something. If we are building, improving, building, improving. So, if your life is all about improving and building something, then how you can be demotivated on your personal life? But again, it really matters if you are going to be passionate on coding or not. Yes, even nights gonna be skipped in coding. Yes, sometime it is gonna be, but it's worth it, man. It's worth it. Okay, so let's understand this React UI library, what we are going to use. Tell me if you want to, if anyone is there who want to end it, or we can take maybe 15 more minutes and we can just create our certain components with this. And tomorrow we are going to create entire thing, because I don't want to start with the introduction and then tomorrow we are directly going to dive into and create the sign in sign up page. So anyone wanna end this? Just type, don't type end, just simply type it down. It was a good session, maybe any compliment. So I'll understand with that compliment that today's class needs to be end. Okay, it was. So it is a compliment, but we had to end it. Perfect. So seems like, but many people are not commenting. Okay, let's see how many people want to continue. It's always a great session. Okay, so the people are let continue. Okay, people are also uh, uh, okay, so Anvisha, now you are confusing me. Like it's always a great session, and now you're saying you can continue. Great. So okay. So a short of an interaction, and let's do it right away. So let's just change this button. Like this button, we have this button, right? But it's so ugly. I cannot say this. So let's just change this button with Material UI Fluent button, and then we can move forward. So firstly, on the on the hero page only, they have mentioned npm install me MUI, which is Material UI slash Material. They are literally pushing this to install this, and then just install this particular module, and we can move forward for more. Let's install this, and let's directly go dive into the documentation as in this. And in documentation, they have a lot of stuff to say, but we are going to skip it for today. Okay, we can use their responsive feature to, no, not skip. We can use the responsive feature. Yes. So here is a button. This is how they are going to maintain. So again, so component starts with b. Okay, so again, one more thing, this, please be cautious about it. Whenever you are defining any component, the alphabet should be, the first character should be capital every time. And also in the file you are going to write this component, so that file name also should be capital. Now, okay, perfect. Now let's just create this button quick away, and then we can move forward. So we have successfully installed this, I guess. Uh, 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 come on, come on, come on. Let's take it. Okay, we have successfully installed. Now npm start. And the way we are going to import this is simply Material UI slash button. So this Material UI in short, so we can consider this as in, this is a short of a, directory. So this is a short of a directory where all the Material UI components live. Now here we are importing this, right? So in this directory, they have button folder where they are importing button, right? So this is how we are going to import button, and then this button as an, again, component, and see how smooth this button is. Without any css, you are getting this material feeling button. So let's do it. So now this works. Let's simply import this line. We want to save our time now. We have imported this, and again, there are also another way of doing it. Now suppose if you are importing multiple items, maybe like button or maybe more components, so we this is going to happen, right? But we are not going to do this. What we can do is, we, instead of importing from the folder, we can import from somewhere like this, from the root only, and then here we can define the multiple components. So that is a better practice. We are going to work in that way, but just in short intro. Now let's convert this button to the component. Simply just convert to uh, React component by replacing the first character to capital one, and save. You want to see something? Even I'm expecting. Come on. Oh, not now. This is going to take, oh, okay. I don't think it's going to compile, and I guess I know the reason. So usage, but we need to go to installation part first. So in installation, this says this is how we are going to install in the package.json, and style component. Of course, it also supports the different styles, as in style components, or maybe SAS or something. You can use it, and these are the fonts you want to use, SVGs you want to use through CDN and so on. But here it says style engine. Oh, okay. So what we have missed. So we have missed something. So to install and save in your package.json, simply with npm npm install this, and there are more: emotion, react, and style. I don't know why they have mentioned all this. Please note, more than react 17 pure dependencies. Okay, so this is also needed. So let's install this dependencies too. So it says a styled engine is not there. Maybe this is styled they are talking about. So let's install this npm install. So this is why we follow documentation, like on the home page we say this, but again, even after being so experienced, see what I'm doing. Not so experienced, but at least what I'm doing right now. We are starting from the very first page installation, and I have worked on multiple projects with Material UI. So this is how we are going to face, like, not you are not going to work with only one technology like this so that you can master. You are going to work with multiple technologies, and it is absolutely fine if you are not going to remember every single thing. Documentation is always there, but just be aware of it, like where you can find whatever you are searching for. So here you go. And in the comment, okay, thanks for the class, sir, my battery is down. Bye, Shakib. Of course, we are going to cover Material UI tomorrow, but this is just for the sake of short intro. Npm install this and this. Oh yes, and this is going to work. Okay, so this is installed. Now npm start and see our this is working or not. Okay, not one more. I want to see this here only. Okay, now let's refresh. Okay, now see, this is a material kind of sort of a UI, but this is not going to make any sense because we have not passed, but again, we are using this component, but we are not passing any values here, right? So now let's go forward to the documentation and see what do we actually need to do. So in usage, it's like we are using button, and there are certain uh, properties that we need to send, which is like variant, what variant, and there are also more if you move forward the content and so on. No, not this. This is not the thing. Of course, in button components we are going to see, but for now let's just use this variant content. So this button, this variant contained. Without variant, this was a regular button. Now variant content. Now we have this smooth button. Now we are going to work with multiple components, but why I wanted to cover this also, so that you can move forward and go to the MIU, not MIUI, Material UI component, Material UI documentation, and go a bit down, get a better understanding on installation and usage at least, and then go a bit down, and here you will see the component part. And here just go and explore all of these components. There are predefined components, and it's so amazing. Like suppose the button, we are going to work with multiple buttons. So here they have so many examples. Like suppose this is the regular one without variant, and the default one is text actually. There's the content, and this is outline, and all of these are so smooth materialistic feel, right? So they have this different parameters which you can send, like we have this. So you can send to work with this, like suppose this big one maybe, or yes, different color. So you can also define this color secondary and so on. So they are not only this, but there even you can define this icons, and it's so simple. Just pass that icon as in a start icon, pass this icon as a component with the start icon, and that's it, you are good to go. Now they have so many stuff here like progress and so on. We are going to use the multiple one, but tomorrow we are going to use button and one more thing, which is form. So just go ahead and explore this and just look at the code, how they are using these components and what are the variants and so on. So we are going to work with input radio button, no text fields. We are going to work with text fields, and they have different text fields, majorly three: outlined, filled, and standard. See, now if we design this same field with HTML and CSS, trust me, this is going to take a lot of time, at least just for the sake of designing this small one. It's more than what it need to be done. So here we can just create this particular component with only one line, and this is why we are going to use Material UI, and it's awesome. So that's it for today. Now, tomorrow, before tomorrow's class, you can move forward and go to the component and everything. So you can learn more about it, because tomorrow we are going to jump into React. As I've already told you that HTML and CSS should be prerequisite. So here we are using this because I don't want to dig into HTML and CSS much. We can just design it right away by using these components. Okay. Now, anything before we say goodbye? Where quizzes are being held? Quizzes are on the Instagram page. So Shreyansu has just sent this. Just follow the Instagram page, and there you will see all the quizzes. So just participate on that. We are taking count on this. Don't forget to attendance link. Okay, perfect, perfect, perfect. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. And today we are going to, and one more thing, today I'm going to push this particular code, and I'm also going to share this in the paint chat. So you can, you know, get this code all in your local also. I'm not going to change anything. So same thing, I'm just going to push to the local so that you get it and practice on your own. You can just get this the same way, git clone and that particular link on your local machine, and just customize a little bit so you will understand, because the coding is also required. Okay, Shreyan, so I think we are done here.
Thank you, sir. Again, we had a great session from your side. Hope every one of us have learned quite good things from you. Just a reminder to the participants, just fill the feedback form, and I request the backend team to paste it again in the chat box. And I reminder to the participants that go through the Instagram handles and do participate in the quiz to win goodies. And if you have any doubt, you can also mail to gfg.lpu@gmail.com. The backend team will put the email ID in the chat box. So thank you, everyone. Signing off for today.
Thank you, everyone. Bye, Shreyanshu.